What do you mean we're overbooked again? Nolan Keaton snapped, staring at the report in disbelief. He sat in his office on the 29th floor of the corporate tower, looking out over the city skyline but feeling nothing but frustration. 5 hotels. That's what he inherited from his father, 5 well-placed, high-potential boutique hotels across 3 states. And lately, guest complaints had started piling up. Not about the rooms or the food. It was the staff. Cold service. Rude tone. Dismissive attitudes. Nolan had built his reputation on being hands-on, but ever since the expansion he'd relied too much on district updates and filtered reports. He hated that. He didn't want to be a CEO who only saw numbers. He wanted to know what guests actually experienced. So he made a decision. He was going undercover. He chose a name, Ryan, and a role, Bellhop trainee. The 5th and newest location, a downtown hotel in Denver, had the most recent spike in issues. It was also the only location he hadn't personally visited since opening day. Nolan had never met the staff there. The location had been built during a stretch of non-stop work and personal burnout. A new team was hired by the district manager, and Nolan had only seen photos and performance metrics. Perfect cover. He trimmed the beard, dyed his hair a darker brown, and wore thick-rimmed glasses. The uniform fit snug, and the staff was told Ryan was a new hire from a staffing agency filling in for a bellhop who'd left weeks earlier. "Welcome to the chaos," said Penny Hargrove, the front desk manager, barely looking up as Nolan arrived for his first shift. He forced a smile. "Happy to help." She looked him over with a raised brow. "Don't screw up the luggage. I've had enough disasters this month." Nolan nodded and headed to the Bell station. The hotel looked polished on the outside, clean lobby. Modern design, but the energy inside was tense. The front desk staff barely smiled. The radio chatter between teams was clipped and impatient. His first task came quick. A family of 4 pulled up, tired after a cross-country drive. Nolan offered to help with their 5 bags. "Room 312, Penny muttered into the mic. "Put 'em in there and don't take all day." As Nolan hauled the bags, he passed by the front desk again. Penny and the other front desk worker, a guy named Trevor, didn't see him rounding back. "God, did you see that, Mom?" Trevor muttered, "Asking for extra towels like it's a 5-star resort." Penny rolled her eyes. "They're all so needy. Don't smile too much or they'll think we actually care." Nolan froze for a moment, then kept walking. He placed the bags neatly in the room, smiled at the family, and returned to the lobby, heart pounding. He hoped that was just nerves talking. A one-time vent. Maybe they were having a bad day. But it kept happening. By midday, he'd heard them make fun of an older couple who had trouble understanding the keycard system, and call a non-English-speaking guest exhausting. Trevor even mimicked the man's accent once, loud enough for Nolan to hear. They never said it in front of the guests, always behind the desk or in the back hallway. But they said it too easily, too often. At one point, Nolan saw a young woman crying after a conversation with Penny. She looked like she worked housekeeping. He caught up with her by the service elevator. "Hey, you okay?" She wiped her eyes. "Yeah. Don't worry about it. Penny told me I was slow again. I've been working doubles and I'm just tired." He hesitated. "What's your name?" "Paloma." "Paloma, you're doing your best." "I've seen it." She gave him a weak smile. "Thanks. Ryan." Nolan barely slept that night. He came back the next day even more focused. He started talking to the other bellhops and housekeeping staff. One by one, he saw the pattern. Front desk treated them cold, gave vague instructions, then blamed them when something went wrong. Guests weren't greeted warmly. Requests were delayed, and anyone who questioned it was written up or ignored. He watched Penny laugh as Trevor tossed a guest's dry cleaning bag behind the counter like it was trash. But the worst came that afternoon. A man in a wheelchair came in with his teenage daughter. Nolan went to help with the bags. As the guest checked in, he heard it again. "Another one?" Penny said under her breath. "This place is turning into a hospital." Trevor laughed. "Bet he's gonna ask for a room change, too." "Of course he will. They always do. Nolan turned around. The man hadn't heard, but his daughter had. She stared at the two workers, her face slowly hardening. Nolan clenched his jaw. He couldn't take much more. Not just because of what was being said, but because nobody was stopping it. And the people being hurt? They were guests. His guests. He looked over at Paloma, who was quietly folding towels in the back hallway, head down. Something had to change. But first, they had to know who he really was. Nolan's shift started at 7 sharp the next morning. By that time, he had already made up his mind. He wasn't going to wait until the end of the week to act. Too much damage was being done every single hour. He needed to see more, document more. But the moment he witnessed something that crossed the line again, he would end the charade. He stood by the bell desk, posture stiff, watching the lobby come alive. Guests filtered in and out for breakfast. Some asked questions politely, others looked unsure of where to go. It was a typical morning rush, but the way the front desk handled it was anything but standard. "I don't care if she says she needs early check-in," Penny said as she tapped on the keyboard. "We're not her personal concierge." Trevor, leaning on the back counter, chuckled. "She's lucky we're even making eye contact." Nolan didn't react. He just listened. He wasn't interested in collecting more of the same attitudes. He needed to understand how far it went. So he started asking quiet questions in places they wouldn't expect. He caught up with a room attendant in the service hallway just behind the elevators. Her name tag read Janice. "Hey, quick question," Nolan said, keeping his tone light. "That couple in 204, they asked me if they could get their sheets changed. I didn't know what to tell them." Janice nodded slowly. "They were supposed to be on the VIP list. Fresh linens daily. But we haven't been getting updates from the front desk lately. We've been told to stick to the basics." "Who told you that?" "Trevor," she said. "He said we're not a maid army." His words. "Do you ever get pushback when you try to do more?" She hesitated. "Let's just say, last week, I stayed late to clean up a spill in the hallway. Penny logged me for inefficient room turnaround time, instead of asking why I ran over." Nolan's stomach turned. "You ever take it to HR?" Her laugh was short. "HR? They're in Chicago. We send an email, and 2 weeks later we get a form response. Nothing changes." Nolan nodded and let her return to work. Every story was another thread unraveling the whole picture. The front desk culture wasn't just toxic, it was infecting the entire operation. Later that morning, he rotated to the curb to help with arriving guests. A black SUV pulled up and out stepped a middle-aged black couple in business attire, well-dressed, composed, clearly seasoned travelers. Nolan approached with a luggage cart and greeted them warmly. As he lifted the trunk, Penny's voice crackled through the radio on his belt, meant for internal use. "Careful with that one. Maybe they'll try to sue if we scratch their Louis Vuitton." Trevor's voice followed, laughing. "Bet they're influencers. Probably gonna ask for a free upgrade and a welcome gift basket." Nolan's ears burned. There was no mistaking the tone. He looked back at the couple, who were speaking kindly to each other, unaware of what had just been said behind closed doors. He wheeled their luggage in silence, heart pounding. When he returned to the lobby, he didn't go to the bell desk. He went straight to the back office. He knocked once and opened the door without waiting. Penny was inside, sipping coffee. Before she could speak, Nolan took off the glasses and pulled the staff badge from his shirt. Her confusion didn't last more than 2 seconds. "Oh, I'm Nolan Keaton," he said, "owner of this hotel. And you're done here." She stood up slowly, blinking. "Wait, what? You were fired. Effective immediately. Your behavior has been discriminatory, cruel, and unprofessional. I've heard everything. Every word. You've mocked guests, mistreated staff, and poisoned this environment. I don't need any further explanation." Her voice rose. "You can't just walk in here and..." "Yes," Nolan said, voice calm but resolute. "I can. And I just did." Trevor burst in from the hallway halfway into a sentence before he saw Nolan's face. "What's going on?" Penny did. He froze. "Wait. You're gone too," Nolan said, turning toward him. You've shown a pattern of disrespect and bias that has no place in this company. Grab your things. You're not to speak to another guest or employee. Security will escort you both out. Trevor's face turned bright red. You're joking. You don't even know what I do, Nolan said. I've seen it. And more importantly, I've heard it. Enough. By the time security arrived 10 minutes later, both Penny and Trevor were silent. Nolan watched as they were led to the employee exit. No dramatic scenes. Just two people who had finally run out of excuses. He walked back into the lobby where the atmosphere had already begun to shift. The absence of their voices was like fresh air. But he wasn't finished. He gathered the remaining front desk team and housekeeping leads in the staff break room. Some of you know me as Ryan, he began. My real name is Nolan Keaton. I own this hotel, and I've been working undercover for the past 3 days. There were scattered gasps, a few stunned faces. Paloma stood rigid by the wall, eyes wide. I've seen how hard some of you work. I've also seen how some of you have been ignored, dismissed, and disrespected by people who were supposed to lead. That ends today. He let the words settle. You're not alone anymore. And you're not invisible. He turned to Paloma. You've been holding this place together despite being treated like you're the problem. That ends now. You're being promoted to lead housekeeping. Effective immediately. Full-time hours, full benefits. Paloma's hands covered her mouth. She didn't speak, just nodded, eyes glistening. Nolan looked around the room again. We're bringing in an interim general manager from another property to stabilize operations. HR reps will be on site tomorrow for private feedback sessions. I want every one of you to feel safe telling the truth. He paused. And if anyone here believes that treating guests or coworkers with disrespect is acceptable, I suggest you leave now. Because this isn't the place for that anymore. No one moved. No one needed to. That afternoon, Nolan stayed on site, meeting with employees one by one. He didn't delegate it. He sat down with the overnight concierge, the maintenance lead, the kitchen prep crew, listening to stories of missed raises, ignored complaints, and quiet endurance. But also stories of pride. Of people who still believed in the hotel's mission even when their leadership failed them. He made notes, asked questions, promised follow-up, and meant it. By evening, the mood had shifted. The front desk was quieter, but it was no longer cold. Paloma walked through the lobby with a clipboard and a calm authority. Guests were greeted with genuine smiles, not forced ones. Nolan checked into a vacant room that night under his real name. And as he lay back in the unfamiliar bed, he didn't feel angry anymore. He felt responsible. And more than that, he felt ready. The next morning, Nolan didn't put the Bellhop uniform back on. He wore a dark button-down shirt, sleeves rolled just below the elbows, and sat quietly in the corner of the staff room with a notepad and a thermos of coffee. The new interim general manager, a stern but fair woman named Marissa Dole, had arrived from the Santa Fe property just after sunrise. She wasted no time. By 7:30, she was walking the floors, clipboard in hand, asking questions, observing interactions, and pulling staff aside for short, direct exchanges. She didn't introduce herself with flair. She simply said, "I'm here to fix what's broken." Nolan let her take the lead. He needed to see how the rest of the team operated when the two biggest sources of toxicity were removed. That meant stepping back and watching the culture rebuild from the inside. Marissa entered the back office and motioned toward the desk clerk who was now taking over Trevor's shift. A young man named Eli, who'd been quiet the first 2 days Nolan was undercover. "You've been here 6 months?" she asked bluntly. Eli nodded, standing straighter. "Yes, ma'am." "Why didn't you speak up about what was going on?" His jaw tightened. "I didn't think anyone would listen." Penny had the district manager on speed dial. Everyone knew that. People got written up for giving the wrong opinion. Marissa scribbled something down. "Not anymore. You're not being reprimanded. I need honesty. Did you ever join in?" "No," Eli said quickly. "I kept my head down. I knew what they were doing was wrong. I just didn't want to lose the job." Marissa looked him over for a moment. "You want to stay here?" "Yes." "Then you're on notice. I'm not cleaning house again next month." If you see something off and don't say anything, that's a problem. I understand. She left him standing there and moved on. Nolan watched the exchange and made a mental note. Eli wasn't part of the rot, but he hadn't tried to stop it either. That could change, but only if someone taught him how to lead. Downstairs, the lobby had taken on a strange calm. Without Penny and Trevor, the remaining staff had shifted into a cautious rhythm. It wasn't cheerful, but it wasn't hostile either. It was silent rebuilding. No one quite knew where the lines were now, but at least they weren't afraid of being mocked behind their backs. At 10, Nolan sat with Paloma in the break room. She looked more rested than she had 2 days ago, though there were still dark circles beneath her eyes. Her uniform fit better, now cleaner, pressed, and her name tag had been upgraded to include her new title, housekeeping lead. "You doing okay?" he asked gently. She nodded, sipping from a paper cup. "It's strange. People are making eye contact now, saying thank you. I didn't realize how long it had been since anyone said that around here." "You've earned it," he said. "And more." She hesitated, then looked at him directly. "Can I ask something?" "Of course. Are you going to stay? Or is this just a one-week thing to clean up and move on?" Nolan didn't rush his reply. "I'm not disappearing. I won't be here every day, but there's going to be a structure in place. Regular unannounced visits. Local HR presence. People you can actually talk to in person. And I'll read every report myself." Paloma nodded. "Good. Because this place, it could be great. Still. But not if it slides back again." "It won't," he said. "Not if people like you are leading." They didn't say anything for a while. Just sat in the quiet hum of the break room, where trust was starting to grow again slowly, but for real this time. By noon, Marissa had compiled a list of what she called operational fractures, everything from missed maintenance requests to staff being scheduled in ways that guaranteed burnout. For example, Janice was still being asked to clean 12 rooms solo on certain days, while front desk staff often had only 2 people running morning and evening shifts combined. "We're going to need to hire at least 3 more people for housekeeping and 2 for front desk within the next month," she told Nolan in the office. "But in the meantime, we need to rotate better. No more back-to-back doubles unless they volunteer." "Agreed," Nolan said. "Do what you need to do. You have full discretion." At 2, a situation unfolded that made it clear just how much work was still ahead. A guest in her late 50s came down to the lobby, visibly upset. Her room key had stopped working, and she needed access to retrieve her medication. Eli was at the desk, trying to juggle a phone call, a guest check-in, and the woman's concern all at once. "I can get you a new key," he said, typing quickly. "Just give me a second." She crossed her arms, breathing hard. "I can't wait. I'm supposed to take it now. I told the other woman this morning that the card wasn't working, and she said she'd fix it." Nolan stepped forward, already moving toward the elevators. "I'll take you up. I have a master key." She followed him, clearly stressed. "It's for my blood pressure." "I don't know why this is so hard." When they reached her floor, he opened the door and let her in. She went straight to her suitcase, pulled out a plastic container, and sat on the bed, breathing slowly. "Thank you," she said after a moment. "They didn't used to be like this. I've stayed here before." "I know. And I'm sorry for how things have been." She looked at him more closely then. "Wait, you're not staff, are you?" "I am. In a way." He gave a small smile. "Things are changing." Back downstairs, Marissa had already pulled Eli aside again. "You need backup," she said bluntly. "You're being set up to fail on that desk solo." "I know. I was trying to keep up." "It's not your fault," she said. "But it's not sustainable either. I've already called in one of the part-timers to fill in this afternoon. Going forward, you'll always have someone with you during peak hours." Eli looked relieved. "That would help. A lot." "Good. Now take your 15. Come back with a clear head." By late afternoon, Nolan called a meeting in the old conference room. Everyone was invited: housekeeping, bell staff, maintenance, reception. Even the kitchen crew who rotated in during prep breaks. It wasn't a speech. It was a conversation. "I'm not here to give you a lecture," Nolan said, standing near the window. "You've all lived through enough of those. He looked around the room. People didn't look defensive. They looked curious. I came here because reports weren't matching reality. What I found was a place where good people were being dragged down by a few who shouldn't have been here in the first place. He paused, then continued. I saw racism. I saw people mocked for their age, their disability, their culture. That will never happen again. Not while I own this building. A few heads nodded. Paloma sat quietly in the back, arms folded, watching him. But I also saw people who didn't give up, who stayed late, worked doubles, and still tried to make this place better. I saw pride even when no one was watching. He stepped closer to the table. I'm not asking you to forget what happened. I'm asking you to help me rebuild it. One shift at a time. A silence followed, not uncomfortable but thoughtful. Then an older man from maintenance, Luis, raised his hand. Are we finally getting new washers downstairs? The old ones stall every week. You are, Nolan said. Marissa ordered replacements this morning. That drew a few surprised looks, small signs of trust starting to crack through the surface. When the meeting ended, people didn't rush out. They lingered, chatted, even laughed a little. Nolan stayed behind, talking with Marissa about next steps, staffing timelines, HR presence, and a new system for guest feedback that would bypass the district office entirely. Outside, the sun dipped low behind the skyline. The hotel glowed in the golden hour. It wasn't fixed. Not yet. But for the first time in months, it wasn't falling apart either. And that was something. 3 weeks later, the Denver property looked the same on the outside. Same facade, same signage. But inside, the rhythm had changed. The front lobby no longer echoed with tension. It wasn't perfect. There were still missed calls, occasional delays, and days where the staff stretched themselves thin. But the undercurrent of fear, the brittle silence, the worn-down expressions, that was gone. Nolan returned on a Thursday morning just after breakfast hours. He didn't wear a suit. No entourage. Just walked in, nodded at the front desk, and stepped aside while a young woman handled a check-in with a calm, practiced tone. Her name was Tasha. She'd been hired the previous week. First hotel job. Her voice didn't waver once. From the corner of the lobby, Nolan watched her finish the interaction and thank the guest without sounding rehearsed. She turned around and finally noticed him standing there. Are you Mr. Keaton? She asked, walking over. He gave a short nod. Nolan's fine. I heard you might be coming in today. Marissa said you'd want the full walkthrough. She's right, he said. You up for that? As long as you don't mind a few detours, she said. We're still working out some kinks. They started in the lobby, then moved toward the elevators. She pointed out a new signage system for local attractions installed 2 days ago. Simple, clear, and actually updated daily. Not just a dusty brochure rack shoved in a corner. By the time they reached the 3rd floor, Nolan saw Luis working with another maintenance tech in the hallway. They were replacing a panel in the wall, something about faulty insulation. Luis gave a brief wave, then went back to work. No interruptions. No forced updates. Just people doing their jobs without looking over their shoulders. Upstairs, 2 housekeepers were collecting supplies from a newly organized storage space. The carts were labeled, refilled, clean. The woman on the left, a tall, quiet worker named Adina, nodded at Nolan as she passed. She's good, Tasha said once they were alone. Doesn't talk much, but she's fast, and she double-checks every room. I've seen her re-roll towels if they're even slightly off. They walked past room 306, where a guest had left a comment card the day before complimenting the staff by name. That had never happened before. The names were now pinned to the employee board in the break room. When they reached the service corridor, Nolan paused. Tell me something, he said. You weren't here during the first few weeks, but you've heard things. What's the mood now? Be honest. Tasha folded her arms. I didn't know how bad it was until I started hearing stories. But I'll tell you this, people have stopped whispering. That's a big deal. Nobody's afraid to ask for clarification anymore. And if someone's out of line, it's not ignored. Nolan nodded slowly. That's what I hoped to hear. Back in the break room, Marissa was going over the new scheduling software with Paloma and Janice. The layout was simple colored bars indicating shifts, with bold red warnings if someone was close to exceeding their maximum hours. It wasn't high-tech, but it worked better than the clunky spreadsheet they'd been using before. Janice looked up when Nolan entered. "You're early." He pulled out a chair. "Didn't want to miss the rundown." Paloma tapped the screen. "We've got 2 new part-timers starting next week. Once they're trained, we can finally rotate weekend coverage without burning anyone out." "Training plans done?" he asked. "Almost," she said. "I want to do it myself. I've got notes from the last orientation. It was outdated. Half the stuff didn't even apply anymore." Marissa closed her laptop. "We're also finalizing a new feedback loop. Anonymous, digital, and reviewed weekly. Not quarterly. No more pretending things are fine until they explode." "Good," Nolan said. Luis stepped in then, wiping his hands on a towel. "We're going to need a better ladder," he said. "The one we've got's wobbly. Almost dropped a fixture this morning." "Write it up. Send it to purchasing," Marissa said without missing a beat. He gave a thumbs up and left. No debate. No approval chain. Just handled. Nolan stood up. "Let's walk." He motioned to Marissa, and the 2 of them left the break room and headed to the office behind the front desk. Once inside, he closed the door behind them and leaned against the wall. "How bad was it really?" he asked. "Once I left." Marissa sat on the edge of the desk. "There was damage. Some of it cultural, some procedural. You can't run a place with people who've been conditioned not to care. That doesn't go away overnight." "I know. But you had a few people holding the line. Paloma, Luis, even that kid Eli. They just needed someone to back them up." "Is he stepping up?" "He's not perfect," she said. "But he's learning." "He handled a guest situation yesterday with more patience than I expected." Nolan crossed his arms. "I want to keep momentum. That means structure." "You thinking permanent changes?" "I'm thinking not just here. Every location. 1 silent audit per quarter. No warning. Rotated leadership. And HR has to be local, or at least regionally embedded." Marissa nodded. "You'll lose a few managers who don't like being watched. Then they weren't supposed to be here. They left the office just as the lunch crowd began to filter in. A group of business travelers checked in with rolling briefcases. Tasha greeted them, asked about their preferences, even offered to hold their luggage while they waited for their rooms. No hesitation. No sarcasm. Just service. Nolan stepped outside for a moment. The midday sun was sharp, reflecting off the glass doors. A delivery truck pulled into the side lot and a kitchen staffer waved them toward the service entrance. Everyone had a place. Everyone was moving with purpose. He turned as Paloma joined him by the curb. "Didn't think you'd still be here," he said. "I had one more thing to finish," she replied. "Restocking carts for the night crew." "You didn't have to do that." "I know." She looked out toward the street. "But it's better when you leave things ready for the next person." He nodded. "I meant what I said. You're the kind of leader I want in this company." "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "But I'll hold you to what you promised." "You should." A guest stepped out of a taxi and approached the entrance. Nolan stepped aside as Paloma headed in to greet them. No delay, no prompting, just instinct. He watched for a moment, then turned and walked down the sidewalk. No announcement. No farewell. The work was far from over. But the foundation was solid now, and the people inside had started building something worth keeping.